Welcome, everybody, to day 3 of Assembly Week. My name is Rachel Weinberger. I'm the Vice President for Research Strategy, and I hold the Peter Herman Chair for Transportation here at RPA. Mondays and Tuesdays panels were both excellent. If you didn't catch them, you will be able to soon in syndication. I believe we are on track to meet the high bar. Today's conversation, What Helps Us Move in the Future, will be kicked off by Justine Johnson, the Chief Mobility Officer for the state of Michigan. Justine will frame the issues, and then I'll hand off the panel to Tiffany Ann Taylor, the Chief Strategy Officer for New York City DOT. Before I introduce Justine, I'd like to tell you a little bit about RPA and our recent work. For those who are new to RPA, we are a regional planning NGO and have been advancing projects that strengthen the region and improve quality of life for the residents for the past 101 years. We work in energy and environment, transportation, housing and neighborhood development, and institutional reform. Last week, we released a major new report on Penn Station that examines the current operations there and lays out the considerations the transit agencies must balance as discussions around Penn transformation advance. We recently looked at economic impacts of transportation spending and how projects are evaluated. What's the point of transportation without consideration of people? We also took a look at New Jersey's housing growth with 2 detailed reports this past year examining the impact of the state plan and Mount Laurel doctrine. Both show that New Jersey's policies have worked as intended, driving an overall increase in housing production with a significant share of that growth concentrated in urban, walkable places near transit, thanks to the state plan and the Mount Laurel obligations. Housing needs power. We cover that too. Our energy and environment team unpacked the grid with their recent report, It's Electric. I encourage you to check out these and all our work at rpa.org. Now, toward the main event. Justine Johnson is the Senior Vice President and Chief Mobility Officer of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. In that role, she leads the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, advancing the state's mission to build a safer, more equitable, and more innovative mobility ecosystem. Prior to joining Team Michigan, Justine served on the Los Angeles County Aviation Commission. She was the Director of Member Engagement at the California Mobility Center, a nonprofit that promotes commercial interactions with new mobility companies and industry-leading entities to deploy new products, programs, and services in clean mobility. Prior to that, Justine served as Head of Mobility Engagement for the Southern California and Southwest region at Ford Motor Company, after having served as Ford's mobility strategist. I'd be remiss not to mention her familiarity with the tri-state region, having served as Vice President of Government and Community Relations for the New York City Economic Development Corporation, focused on improving the ferry system, and her work at the Taxi and Limousine Commission, promoting the Borough or Green Taxi program. Please welcome Justine Johnson.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those from across the globe. Again, my name is Justine Johnson, and I serve as Chief Mobility Officer for the state of Michigan. I want to give a big shout out to RPA, the full staff and team, for organizing this event, but also for inviting me to serve as a keynote speaker leading up to this panel. Before I say anything about where we're going, I want to tell you a little bit about where I've been because I think that matters. I've spent most of my career at the intersection of transportation, innovation, and equity across some of the most dynamic cities and regions in this country. In New York City, I worked on economic development initiatives, shout out to NYC Ferry and the Borough Taxi Program, that forced me to reckon early with the fundamental truth that transportation is not just a service, it is a lifeline. When the train doesn't run, people don't get to work. When a bus route is cut, families are cut from their opportunities. I learned in New York that mobility is infrastructure, not just physical infrastructure, but also social infrastructure. From New York, I took many of these lessons back home west to Los Angeles, California, where I did serve on the Los Angeles County Aviation Commission. And that role truly gave me a front seat of the next frontier of transportation. In LA, I began to look up, literally, I started to look up. The sky was no longer just a place where I looked at birds and planes, but it became a corridor, really talking about topics like advanced air mobility, drones, air taxis, electric vertical takeoff and landing type of aircraft that was moving from a Jetson science fiction world to actual city planning and urban transportation. I left Los Angeles pretty convinced that the future of transportation was always going to be multimodal, but it was also going to be multidimensional and probably more contested and more exciting than any of us could fully imagine. And then I came to Michigan because Michigan is where it all threads together. The state has truly transformed transportation before. We've introduced the world to the automobile. We built the supply chains, the workforce, the engineering culture that powered a century of mobility. We know how to do this really well, and today we're doing it all over again. I lead Michigan's Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, also known as OFME, because the title's really long, where we created an executive directive that was passed by or signed by Governor Whitmer in 2020. And our charge from day one has been clear. It is really to secure Michigan as a global leader in mobility innovation, not just for the industry, but the people we serve who live here. OFME sits at a unique nexus of four different state departments, weaving together policy, infrastructure, investment, workforce, and industry growth into a single coordinated strategy. It's a structure unlike anything else in this country. And it's like that by design. When you want to move fast in a space that is moving often faster than you are, you can't afford to have your agencies moving in different directions. So that's what's really important to this office. So, what does mobility actually mean in 2026? So, I'll attempt to ground us into this term and leading up to the conversation for the panel. Mobility, as I define it, is anything that uses clean energy to move people, goods, and information over land, water, and air. That definition truly does matter because it's expansive on purpose. The future of transportation is not just only about one lane, it's the lane, it's about converging all of them. Under the Michigan Mobility Future Plan, which is our North Star for many of the ways in which we do our work, we have organized our work around three core pillars. First is around creating. We build the foundation by supporting early stage high growth companies to actually deploy solutions in the built environment. This helps to remove barriers and also ensure that our infrastructure can meet the demand of the next generation of technologies. Second, it's about cultivating. We develop an ecosystem so that companies don't just start in Michigan, but they stay in Michigan from the cradle to commercialization. They grow here, they hire here. And third, it's about propelling. We make sure our workforce and our manufacturing base are ready for what's coming, not reacting to it, but leading it. The results so far, OFME has awarded more than 200 grants totaling over $130 million. We have facilitated over 300 public-private partnerships, and those partnerships have catalyzed 30 times the original investment. When you add state, federal, industry dollars together, we're talking more than $225 million mobilized towards electric and advanced aerial mobility in this state alone. This work is really not abstract. It's about jobs, it's about innovation, and it's really about focusing on Michigan's economy being repositioned for the next century. But here is what I want to make sure each of you all understand. None of this matters if it doesn't reach people. I grew up understanding what it meant to depend on public transportation. I come from a family that knows what it's like when a system doesn't work for you, when you're not the assumed rider, when you're not the assumed driver, when you're not the assumed beneficiary of innovation that's happening around you. That experience is not something that I set aside when I put my chief mobility officer hat on, but it's the lens through which I do my work. A central priority of everything that OFME does is expanding equitable access to mobility. That means rural communities that have been chronically underserved by transportation gets acknowledged and prioritized. It means urban neighborhoods with disinvestment baked into transit maps, really having an opportunity to redefine what the future of connectivity and transit looks like. It means seniors and older adults who need to get to medical appointments actually have a service that can get them from point A to point B. It also means people with disabilities who deserve the same freedom of movement as everyone else gets to be a part of that mobility journey. Mobility is not a luxury. It's the connective tissue that between people and community, between home and between work, between need and between care, and between isolation and community. If we build the future of mobility and leave any of these populations behind, we haven't actually built the future. We've built a faster version of the past. So let's talk about what's actually coming ahead because the landscape is moving pretty fast. In the topic of advanced air mobility, I'll just hint on something that the state of Michigan is doing. Governor Whitmer signed an executive directive 2005-04, establishing Michigan's whole of government approach in advanced aerial mobility. We've awarded more than $4 million in advanced air mobility projects, and in 2026, we're watching this sector mature in real time. This means small and ultralight vehicles gaining autonomous capacity, safety standards beginning to crystallize, and as well as the FAA's work to finalize its Part 108 framework that will unlock a whole new regime of commercial drone operations. But underneath it all, powering every autonomous system, every connected vehicle, every drone corridor is data. Data is the lifeblood of emerging mobility, and its role is only growing. It's what fuels autonomous vehicles as they read and respond to the world around them in real time. It's what enables AV operations to scale safely, feeding the machine learning systems that make split decisions on our roads and in our airspace. And increasingly, data, something we might call the digital infrastructure, the virtual pathways running parallel to our physical ones are becoming now more important. The pathways that support traffic management systems that optimize the way in which goods and people move across the network. They enable digital payments that make mobility seamless across different modes. They are creating new efficiencies in freight and logistics that will fundamentally reshape how goods move from origin to destination. Physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure are no longer separate conversations. In mobility, the future that we're building, they are one and the same. E-commerce is being reshaped by both infrastructure and as well as data. For example, Amazon Prime Air is already conducting drone deliveries in Michigan. We're seeing sidewalk bots and autonomous shuttles and personal delivery devices that are transitioning from being just a prototype, but being into a form factor that's in our neighborhood, that's on our streets, that are serving rural and urban cores alike. The question is not whether they will arrive. The question is whether we shape how they arrive and for whom. Cybersecurity and counter drone systems are becoming defense priorities as drones proliferate the need to detect, identify, and safely manage the airspace. Michigan's defense and manufacturing sectors have a real opportunity here as well. And threading through all of its conversation is just that this is only the beginning, but a big part of this is privacy. As drones become more common and as data infrastructure that depends grows more and more dense, the debate on how to align their utility with the rights and expectations of communities will only intensify. This is a policy design challenge as much as a technology challenge, and it will require the kind of cross-sector, cross-agency collaboration that Michigan has built in its model today. So where does this all leave us? It leaves us at a threshold, and at thresholds, in my experiences, are not a place where we stand still. From our curbs to our skyways, the sidewalk robot navigating a neighborhood block, to the electric aircraft beginning to trace new corridors above our cities, the mobility landscape is truly being rewritten. And the people in this room and in virtual rooms are the people tuning in from across the region and jurisdictions and across sectors are not just spectators, but they are actually authors rewriting this future. But here's what we need to hold on to. None of us can write that story alone. The future of mobility does not respect city limits. It does not stop at a county line or state border. A drone corridor doesn't care which municipality it crosses. An autonomous freight route doesn't pause to check jurisdictional authority. The infrastructure of tomorrow, both physical and digital, will be built across boundaries, or it won't be built at all. That means collaboration is not just a courtesy, it is a best practice. In the architecture of our collective success, city leaders, state agencies, city planners, regional planners, federal partners, industry innovators, academia, and community advocates, we are all load bearing walls in the same structure. When one of us is missing, the whole system is weaker. So I want to challenge every person hearing these words. Find your seat at a table. Find your lane in the ecosystem and show up consistently, generously, and with your full expertise because someone's breakthrough depends on your presence. Now, I want some of you to now I know some of you may be thinking the uncertainty is very real. The regulatory landscape is still taking shape. The technology is moving oftentimes faster than policy can keep up with. Standards are being rewritten. Business models are constantly being tested. There are mornings where the ground feels like it's literally shifting beneath your feet. But that's good. That means that we are making progress and we are moving. Uncertainty is not a stop sign, it is a terrain of innovation. Every sector that has ever transformed, whether that's the beginning of time when we think about transportation, aviation, telecommunications, and beyond, has passed through a period where the rules weren't fully written and where the path wasn't fully clear. The organizations and the leaders who thrived were not the ones who waited for certainty. They were the ones who leaned in, built relationships, made smart bets, and stayed at a table long enough to shape the outcome. That is the posture I am inviting you all to have today. Not reckless, but courageous, collaborative, forward leaning engagement with what is coming. Be proactive. When your city is deciding how to zone for any type of mobility innovation, be in the room. When your region is designing its next transportation investment, ask the question about what comes next, not just what exists now. When federal opportunities emerge, build a coalition and go after them together. Find the opportunity. It is there in the data infrastructure that is being built beneath our cities, in the airspace being organized above them, in the workforce being trained to operate systems that didn't exist a decade ago, and in communities that have been underserved by the old model and are hungry for something better. The future of mobility is not a destination we passively arrive. It is something we drive deliberately, boldly, and together. So I leave you with this. The seat is open. The road is still being built in real time. And there has never been a better moment or a moment or one particular moment to get behind the wheel of innovation. So do so and do so quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine, for those fantastic remarks. Thank you for reminding us that transportation, oh, sorry, technical glitch there. You all heard what I said, but I'll repeat. Thank you, Justine, for those fantastic remarks. I don't know why my video keeps going off. There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you for reminding us that transportation is a lifeline, not just a service. and also for your optimism and your encouragement that we come to the table and participate. Reminding us also of Michigan's history in transportation. I hadn't made that a quite obvious connection. Thank you for saying so. I'd like to turn now to the panel discussion. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce my former RPA friend and now forever professional friend and colleague, Tiffany Ann Taylor. Tiffany's work spans many aspects of transportation, including freight, congestion pricing, safe streets, green transportation, infrastructure, community protection. In all of her work, Tiffany is a tireless and effective advocate at amplifying community voices that are too often ignored or drowned out. She's been away from RPA for just a few minutes, but I am very thrilled to welcome back Tiffany. It was no surprise when DOT Commissioner Flynn scooped her up as the New York City DOT Chief Strategy Officer just 5 weeks ago. I could go on, but as I always like to say, show don't tell. So turning it to you, Tiffany, to do what you do so well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I very much appreciate the warm and heartfelt introduction. Thank you, of course, to the rest of the RPA team for the invitation, or at least letting me come back. And definitely thank you so much to Justine Johnson for those really incredible words. I was moved. I took a bunch of notes, and I think her keynote is definitely worth watching again so that it can sink in. And what I want to take from her words, that's something that she said in the beginning to introduce our panel, is the reminder, what is mobility, right? It's something that moves people, goods, and information over land, water, and air. And so with that, what does help us move in the future? I'm going to start by introducing my fellow panelists, and I invite them to join me on screen as I announce them. So please welcome Angela Pinsky, Head of Community Engagement for Amazon, Marty Beard, CEO of Hayden AI, Ligia Gualpa, Executive Director, Workers Justice Project, Stacy Matlin, Senior Vice President of Innovation for the Partnership Fund for New York City, and of course, Jean Rohrenbeck, Deputy Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and let's go ahead and get started because clearly we have a lot to talk about. So Marty, I'm going to have the first question go to you and then invite fellow panelists to join in afterwards. So Marty, how do you define innovation and advancements in your work? And is it something
Mhm.
that's always based on technology or is it human
Mm.
powered?
Okay, great question. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on the panel. That's a great question. Yeah, just quick introduction. I mean, we are a technology company, 100% focused on improving public transit. That's all we do. We're in San Francisco, so we're in the heart of the AI, the AI world. But to get to your question, I mean, for us, it's just completely a human technology synthesis. It's the only way that it works, right? So at the end of the day, for us, innovation is bus speeds improve, collisions are reduced, on-time arrival improves, so the people riding public transportation in New York are actually feeling that improvement, right? Technology should almost be in the background where it's literally just doing its job in a very practical way. So for us, it's we're transit riders, and so all we do is think about how can technology like AI actually help. So we're on MTA buses, and we have been active for many years on trying to eliminate obstructions and so forth. But the innovation again comes from what do people that are actually riding the bus actually need? And then how can technology actually help? We don't start from a tech first mindset. It's more, there's a lot of great technology in the world, and you could say Silicon Valley's inventing a lot of interesting stuff. But how do I apply it practically to a situation like this? And the good news is it works, right? So we actually can see improvements in bus speed and reduce collisions and so forth, which is super, motivating and exciting for us.
Great, great. I invite others. Angela, Ligia, how do you define innovation? And is it always technology or is it human powered?
Yeah, so for Amazon, we are an e-commerce platform we're lots of things, but for the purposes of moving things and people around New York, we are a large employer. We have about 25,000 employees in the area. And then we also have the e-commerce platform where at this point, New Yorkers are receiving over 2 million packages daily. So it is a big part of what is going on our streets. And then we also have divisions of business, including Whole Foods and Amazon Grocery, which I think some people may not remember when they're thinking about Amazon. So it's a lot of stuff moving around. And for us, New York has actually been a wonderful place for applying some innovations, particularly in that last mile delivery. We have been working very closely with the city and our partners on trying to focus particularly on micromobility to optimize efficiency, create neighborhood scale solutions, moving away from carbon intensive systems and towards electrification as much as possible. So in New York, one of the most visible, I think, of innovations that we've introduced here is the cargo bikes. So Amazon and Whole Foods have been delivering by bike since 2019, but really in 2024 and 2025, when the DOT had amended its regulations, these four-wheel bikes with the storage on the back really started to hit the streets in New York. So now we have over 800 of those bikes serving parts of Brooklyn and Manhattan. And New York is the first place in North America where we have them. And what we are seeing is that we are able to deliver a substantial amount to the point now where in Manhattan, we don't have trucks delivering to the customer. It will either be on a bike, the walker model, or our hub model where we work with businesses to be able to deliver to an immediate vicinity around them. So it is a exciting time to see how we can move to these electric and non-carbon intensive solutions and to see that they are working. The smaller bike footprint compared to a truck. For every bike that's on the road, it takes one truck or one van off of the road. And so having the smaller footprint, not only is the vehicle more efficient, but it creates less idling behind it. It creates less traffic. The bikes are capped at 12 miles an hour per the city regulations for speed limits. And so there's a lot a lot fewer incidents. And we're seeing that people are excited to see the bikes. And so I think that there's a happiness factor associated with it as well. And I'm thrilled that New York is the place where we're piloting these innovations and seeing how well they can work. And now Amazon is looking at other cities across the nation to see how these can be deployed as well.
Great, great. We might come back to that a little bit. Lihia, you were going to say something. How do you define innovation? Is it human powered? Is it technology? What do you say?
Yeah, nice video. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. For Workers' Justice Project in Los Deliveristas Unidos, innovation is not just defined by technology, but it's defined on how that improves the workers' lives and the safety and the dignity of the people who um, are are part of this new wave of innovation when it comes to the use of technology. In the space that we are organizing, particularly, sorry, we're organizing in New York City, for instance, 80,000 app delivery workers that are powering the entire city of New York by delivering 2.7 million deliveries per week, which means transporting food, groceries across the city and working directly with technologies who are using technology to make more accessible to access goods, to transport goods across the city. And for us, innovation not only comes about how we're creating effective systems to transport and making logistical more accessible to New Yorkers, but also comes of making sure that as we're advancing and using technology, that this doesn't come that doesn't put all the cost and the risks into the human beings who are powering these new economies and making conditions more safer and more dignified for workers who are still on the front lines, powering technology, making possible that our city keeps moving. So for us to often innovation, the human perspective tends to be lost, and also what is how we make sure that that the community who are in the front lines of still powering technology are also treated with dignity. So in the industry for us, innovation comes about making sure that 80,000 app delivery workers have living wages, have safer streets, that we're improving to a new safer micromobility infrastructure, that we were building our streets to condition it to more safer forms of transportation and moving across the city, and making sure that the use of these new technologies across the city is also making sure that the lives of the people who are either using it or benefiting it are more dignified and safe.
Thank you. Now, Stacy, you actually have the word innovation in your title, right? Senior Vice President of Innovation. So I'm curious, how do you define innovation?
Sure. As a brief introduction, hello, I'm Stacy Matlin. I work with the Partnership Fund for New York City, which is a $130 million impact investment arm of the Partnership for New York City, where we invest in New York City-based startups that spark innovation or grow the economy in an inclusive way, and also fund programs that help to facilitate tech in the public interest. In my role, I oversee our 3 public sector innovation labs, where we work closely with New York City and state agencies in the fields of transit, water, and building regulations to help identify, test, and scale new technologies that solve their pressing challenges. And since we're at an RPA event specifically focusing on the transit space, we run a program in partnership with the MTA, Port Authority, DOT, and New Jersey Transit on an annual basis to identify, test, and scale new technologies. And we've been running that program since 2018, have facilitated over 1,100 company applications, run 100 proof of concepts, 70 pilots, and then have seen 22 solutions commercially scaled throughout the use. And what we see is the most impactful thing about innovation, it's not necessarily any one of these individual technologies, but more the process, the challenge-based process that we facilitate that enables staff to identify and enables new ways of thinking and working. So just as a quick example of how this looks like, in the first year of the Transit Tech Lab, we worked closely with New York City Transit Department of Buses, and they wanted to understand how new technologies can make buses move faster. And at the time, there's folks within New York City Transit who said, we know what makes buses faster. We just need cameras to identify cars parked in bus-only lanes, and we'll give them. And yes, we have Hayden AI, we have Marty from Hayden AI, and we found some solutions that helped to seed the RFP that Hayden AI eventually won. And yes, ticketing cars parked in bus-only lanes is a great way to speed up buses. But we also found 2 other categories of solutions, including Remix, which is a bus network redesign tool that digitizes the bus planning process and saves bus planners 70% of time. So having better, more efficient data and more efficient bus planning can make buses faster. And another, we had a company that was a predictive maintenance solution that could identify when the bus was going to be out of service 48 hours before the check engine light turns on. So when you don't have buses that are clogging up buses that are out of service, clogging up bus-only lanes, that also helps speed up buses. So just really thinking more broadly around how the process, a challenge-based iterative testing and scaling process is giving permission to try that is probably the best way to think about innovation.
Great, great. And Gina, I don't want to leave you out of the conversation. What about for you at Port Authority? And I know you're new to the team. Congratulations on the role. But how would you define innovation and advancement at the port?
Yeah, I think, I think at the Port Authority, innovation is less about chasing the newest technology and more about looking at operational problems and solving them at a regional scale. I think that could be digital tools, procurement models, sustainability standards, customer experience, of course, or how we're approaching capital delivery and those projects. So I think, what connects all those things for us is whether is the test whether or not that improves reliability, safety, resilience, efficiency, and public trust across a really complex bi-state system. As you noted, I'm new, so still wrapping my head around this, and I just wanted to also thank you for having me and joining the other panelists.
Of course, of course. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. And I remind the audience, please drop your questions in the chat. I am already getting them. And I tell you, panel, some of them are very juicy. So get ready. All right. So, Angela, you touched a little bit about this before, but maybe you can talk to us about some of the techniques that you've used at Amazon or Amazon has used to standardize the adoption. You gave us a really good overview, especially of how the Walker model or the bikes are being used specifically in New York City, but what is it like to standardize adopting something at that scale?
Yeah, I think particularly with anything new, I think one of the key components of this is having an iterative process, right? So I think there's a lot of communication in the beginning. There was a lot of conversation with the city and DOT, particularly with the Walker model. You know, we do have a couple piloted loading zones on the streets to see how if that relieves some of the pressure or double parking or in the commercial parking zones. And so those kinds of pilots come from conversations and open dialogue. And then, you know, we are sharing data on how it's working, and we are taking community feedback about whether or not they find it to be intrusive, or they'll report problems to us, or they'll reach out to their council member, who will also reach out to us. And so I think understanding that the introduction of new systems is likely going to require adjustments as you go along and as you scale is really, really important. And so again, I think what if you look at the history of the bikes that Amazon is using, and you can also see that they're different models on the streets, that they are slightly different from each other, and finding out, you know, what works well and what is the best applicable model for which environment is really important. And I think it's an open discussion, you know, now as we see other organizations also kind of move to these bikes, and we're seeing other branded vehicles similar to the bikes that we're using making deliveries. You know, I think we're looking to organizations like the RPA and to the city to see, you know, what is the right infrastructure to support if there is a big movement and a big shift from motor vehicles into the bikes. And so having, again, these open dialogues is really, really important as part of the implementation.
Great, thank you for that. And I open up to the rest of the panel. Any techniques or maybe some very strong suggestions you've passed along to some of your clients and how, you know, their teams can adopt new innovation? Yeah, go for it, Marty.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to say we have very specific so-called SLAs that we have to meet, and we work on those in collaboration with MTA. And the reason I'm going through that is like there's a standard level that you must obtain in terms of quality of service for the bus. And we're just maniacal about tracking those SLAs. And that really helps make sure that whether it's one bus or you're on 1,500 buses, you're getting a very standard performance and you can actually track it in real time. So everything that we do, remember, it's a moving, this is real time data that's being generated 24/7 in New York. So I would say just establishing those very clear metrics that both sides agree those are the right ones, and then just tracking that in real time obsessively, to be honest.
Thank you. And for the audience, can you just define what's an SLA?
It's a service level agreement. So that would be something like the cameras always work at 99.999. You know, there's a certain percentage of performance. There's no false positives. There's no, you know, this is operating at a very high level. And in tech, that's often called SLAs, or it's a service level agreement between the technology provider, us, and the client, MTA.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to
Sure.
jump on to the next one. Ligia, this we'll start with you. Are there any environmental or social trade-offs to adopting these advancements that we should really be considering, and at what scale?
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, as I said, you know, as an organization that has been focusing a lot on organizing 80,000 delivery workers who are at the edge of innovation because they're really powering new technologies that are emerging in New York City, which is like the app delivery platforms. Um, And in New York City, we're living a unique space where we're seeing that about 70% of those deliveries within the app delivery industry is done on e-bikes or motor scooters, which is a new form of alternative transportation that has been used in the city of New York to move around 2.7 million deliveries every 2 weeks. So talking about on the environmental side, e-micromobility, which has been the main use of form of transportation used by 80,000, has brought real benefits, right? One, it means reduce emission, less congestion in our streets, and lower noise compared to gas-powered vehicles that are used across the city. However, these gains also depends on the infrastructure that exists in our city. And one of the biggest challenges that we're experiencing in New York is because of the rapid dependence of delivery workers on e-bikes, mopeds. There is a real need to catch up with the need of creating better infrastructure and policy. And what also one of the sites has been like has created attention, right, about the how we share the streets, how we make it safety for pedestrians, how we create a new city that adapts to this new reality where more New Yorkers are relying on e-micro mobility. And what in the social side, the trade-off of relying on e-micro, I mean on this new online platform of demand has been that about 56% of app delivery workers in New York rely on mopeds, but the conditions aren't neither much safer for workers because now this work has become one of the most deadliest jobs. Also, all the operating costs has been put into the workers. And we also are rethinking how we redesign our streets, who now have also become the workplace of 80,000 app delivery workers, while helping the city move to a new era of safer micromobility infrastructure. And some of the things that we've been thinking is like what this new infrastructure should look like, right? And you were talking about innovation. Something that we've been thinking and since we started organizing is about deliverista hubs, right? How we expand e-bike charging station, how we adapt these spaces where workers can also have an infrastructure where they can have access to resources, how we redesign, how we imagine delivery zones across the city. So I think we're in a unique space where we can reimagine a new city where we're moving the entire industry to e-micro mobility, but also making sure that workers who are powering the entire industry are more safe and have, and also feel that they are part of this new ecosystem where they have to coexist as well.
Thank you for that. I mean, the work and the experience of the deliveries is really moving the needle as it relates to road safety and, wider adoption of e-bikes. And so understanding the city's infrastructure as that happens is really important. Others on this one, other environmental or social trade-offs that you all consider or you hear your clients consider. Curious if there are other thoughts before I move on to the next question. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one. And Stacy, I'm going to start with you. So what are some of the innovations you're most proud of and why?
I think, again, the process. So just taking a step back, for me personally, I was an entrepreneur. I worked in city government, and that switch from startup to government, I learned a lot, especially around the tools that government does or might not have to quickly test new technologies to be more adaptive and responsive to residents outside of crisis, I would say. And so I think after working in city government, I was searching all throughout the country to find a better model that really helped government agencies test technologies before they have to go through a lengthy 2-year procurement. Came across the Transit Tech Lab as a gold standard model and then ended up moving to New York to run the Transit Tech Lab. And that model has been so successful that we received inbound inquiries from our water utility here, DEP, and then our building regulator. So have scaled the model, not just in transit, but in water and buildings. And so outside of scaling the model of something that we're really proud of, I think ultimately, we see these technologies enabling our transit agency partners to be more efficient, accessible, and responsive. So 3 quick examples of how we found technologies to do each of these 3 things. So efficient, We've worked with a company, Runwise, a New York City-based company that installs controls in boiler rooms to reduce excess overheating and is now scaled within both Port Authority and MTA to save $3 million a year just by reducing excess fuel consumption. So saving carbon emissions and saving dollars, that's a win-win-win. Second is accessible. We've had 3 distinct companies, Navalens, Convo Communications, and Good Maps, that have regionally scaled through our process that helps blind and low vision deaf customers regionally navigate the system. And all 3 have been procured on a regional scale. And then the third, responsive. We've facilitated a test with Path and to help with their predictive maintenance functions. So previously, until last year, in order for Path staff to understand issues on a train, they would have to physically board the train and pull that recorder data and then manually upload it and see what the problem was. Wetronics installs a sensor box. They also have frontward-facing cameras on trains and inward-facing cameras to identify security incidents. And so this one solution helps them provide real-time visibility, predictive maintenance capabilities, and also upcoming federal compliance regulations with upcoming 2027 FRA regulations. So just 3 distinct examples of how new technologies can really be additive in helping our agencies.
That's great. Jean, you're off mute. Did you want to chime in on this one?
Well, I'm always excited to hear about the work you're doing with Path and how we're making Path more reliable, getting ahead of issues before they happen, and of course, increasing safety. So I'm just happy to hear and have you on the panel to talk about that.
Great, great. Other innovations you're proud of? Now's the time to shine. Get the
Can
good
I
love from the audience. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
can I go? No, I mean we're on about 1,600 buses as part of the ACE program in New York, and it's pretty sophisticated. Most people probably don't realize that a public bus going through is like one of the most sophisticated mobile technologies in the entire United States. Right on that bus is literally super sophisticated sensors. There's actually an AI, what we call an AI box that nobody would see. It's kind of hidden in one of those small little sheds on the bus, and on top of the bus is a GPS sensor. So anyway, all this is being fused. So you're getting this very accurate real-time stuff. But the most important thing is it works, and only 9% of people that actually get a violation because they were blocking transit, right? Only 9% repeat. So in other words, it changes behavior dramatically, right? So people go, okay, don't do it again, and that's wonderful, right? That's what we're trying to achieve. So I think we're proud of the innovation of the actual tech, but then again, it's the outcome that I think is the best. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, go ahead, Lihia.
Yeah, I think so. I briefly had mentioned, I think something we're proud this year, particularly, is about the launch of the first Deliverista hub in the nation, which is a unique partnership between the city of New York, the federal government, and a worker organization. And the reason we're very proud, I think, is because, is for the first time we're able to build worker-led solutions where workers have directly been involved in redesigning what kind of infrastructure should be designed outside in the streets to meet the needs of workers. And I think it's very unique to see the city use public space that we're unutilize it to redesign it to adapt into a space where workers can charge their bikes, where they will be able to have access to rest, being able to have access to resources, but also test technology, right? Like when it comes to e-bike charging. And that, we are super proud that these are solutions that are coming out of workers who are redesigning what infrastructure should be designed, what these spaces should look like for them. And for us, it's not just about delivering technology or infrastructure that workers need, but this is also about creating innovation to organize an industry that is powering new technology, that is serving New Yorkers across the city, and also providing trusted physical spaces where workers can feel safe, where they know they cannot just access technology to be able to ride safely across the city, but access to basic resources that they need as human beings that are powering technology across the city. So we're very proud also to think about policy solutions, right? And every time I think about e-micromobility, infrastructure, we always think that also policy solutions need to be worker-led. And in the past years, we've been thinking about how we expand the use of e-micromobility, not only making it safer, but accessible. To people, especially working communities who are relying on e-micromobility in order to move across the city. And last year, we advocated very hard for an e-bike trade program, right? That made it easy for workers to be able to trade their e-bikes at a lower cost, especially for workers that already invest thousands and dollars in the operating cost when they're doing this industry. We're also going to be piloting a workforce development training program, and hopefully at this time we're hoping to partner very closely with DOT as well. Now that they launch a safety training, and the idea is how we help workers use technology to their benefit, right? To stay safe, also to professionalize the delivery industry, and also to be able to navigate our streets more safer. And so we're thinking about how innovation is being able to improve the lives of the human people who are powering technology, empowering our city's economy. And we're super proud that the Deliverista Hub was made possible in a true partnership with the city, but also can be the blueprint of how cities can readapt and redesign technology, not only with workers' input, but with them leading many of these projects as well.
That's great. That's great. Okay, we're going to go to our last question, and I'm going to start with Jean, and then we are going to dive into the audience questions. And I think there might actually be at least a question for each of you. So it should be exciting. Okay, so Jean, we'll start with you, and then, of course, others chime in. Political will and opportunity can change the course of a project. What opportunities or challenges have surfaced given recent changes to administrations in both New York City and New Jersey? And then, of course, the pending gubernatorial elections in New York State and Connecticut.
Yeah, so I think political change is always a double-edged sword, particularly for major infrastructure projects. I think transitions can often slow things down when new teams come in, priorities are reframed or changed. Projects, as we've seen, can be re-reviewed, and some momentum can be lost. But I think at the same time, it also creates real openings because new administrations are looking to define their agenda and show progress on issues, have a refreshed and renewed sort of sense of how they want to approach the things that they've been hearing from their constituents for that last election cycle. So across the region, obviously, new leadership in New Jersey, the governor has signaled that housing production, affordability, and better use of public assets will be part of her conversation, her governing conversation. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of folks on this call are following her recent executive order directing state agencies to identify land and assets, other funding opportunities, and barriers to housing production. In New York City, new administration, city council are also putting housing delivery, public land, and process reform on the table, including efforts to speed affordable housing on city-owned land and recent council proposals to reduce red tape for housing production. And as you pointed out, looking towards the gubernatorial elections in New York State and Connecticut, November of this year, hard to believe, there's a broader political conversation that's happening where affordability, mobility, housing, infrastructure, and regional competitiveness are likely to remain front and center. I think we saw that in both the campaigns in New Jersey and New York, and I think that that's a trend that we'll continue to see as we get into both the local state elections to the region and into the federal and congressional elections later this year. So I think that there's opportunity to frame transportation and infrastructure in the region less as a standalone capital program, more central, and instead look towards the region's competitiveness and affordability. I know everyone's looking towards the A word for affordability in the region. We're getting into campaign season again, so I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I think there's a lot of promise here. I think you're looking at leaders across the river from each other who have in some ways very similar priorities, and I think we see that throughout New York and in Connecticut, and I think that there's a lot to come here, and I think it's an exciting time to be part of this region and watching how we're pushing the world forward. So thanks for the question. There's a lot to come, I think, as we get into November.
Sure. Others on this panel, challenges, opportunities you see with transitions? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, maybe I can share a little bit about in the industry that we're organizing in New York City. I think there is enormous amount of opportunities based on the work that we have built and also in the uniqueness of our city's political environment. I think there is a tremendous opportunity for, especially in the e-micromobility world, to like build core infrastructure to make micromobility more safer and more practical for e-bike riders. We have seen enormous amount of attention to expanding bike lanes. There is conversation about secure parking and what that looks like in the city of New York. We started a conversation about delivery zones that it can't just be thought about, a delivery zone for cars and trucks, but also needs to be designed for e-bikes, cargo bikes. And I think those conversations are already happening. And also the fact that we launched the Deliverista Hub, which I think opens a significant opportunity to have conversations about how we use public spaces and redesign it for the communities that are needed it. And also something that I think, since we have an affordability agenda in the city of New York now, we're consistently, I know that there is a lot of political interest about how we make the transition to safe micromobility more affordable, right? I know that we had a e-bike trade program tried last year that I think could be expanded. And I know at the New York State level, there is some bills about creating rebates for people, especially low-income communities that who want to transition or enter in the use of e-micromobility. And also recently we had the current administration prioritize street safety without punitive enforcement against e-bike riders, right? Eliminating criminal summonses, which I think opens a significant door to think about how we address street safety by investing in infrastructure, but also thinking about how we hold corporations accountable, making them responsible in investing in our city's infrastructure. And I think, yes, we are in a unique moment, not only to reimagine, to rethink, but I think to come up with creative proposals that allows our city to move to a new era of safer micromobility, but also putting at the center the working people who can be part of these decision-making processes about redesigning our streets, rethinking how we use public spaces, and how we move to this new era of safer e-micromobility for our communities.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your thoughts. Okay, audience question time. Jean, I'm going to throw the first one to you. So the Port Authority is the premier bi-state agency charged with mobility infrastructure for the tri-state region by land, air, and sea. What do you think is the greatest challenge for the Port Authority in the next decade?
That's a great question. Biggest challenge for the next decade. I think um, we have a robust plan for the next decade. We have a robust 10-year capital plan, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And there are some pretty big and significant projects on there. I obviously immediately think of the Midtown Bus Terminal. Immediately think of a lot of our airport terminal redevelopment, Newark B. I think that we have a lot on our docket. And I've been thinking about during this conversation, what is innovation at the Port Authority? And I think for us, it's harder to define, I think, than some of the other panelists. But I think when we look at our projects, so we take the bus terminal, we take Newark terminal redevelopment, and how are we incorporating all sorts of different types of innovation? How are we working with our partners, many of those on this call, and getting ideas and figuring out how we're taking and piecemealing together the best projects that we can. So I think I think there are challenges when anyone has multi-billion-dollar projects coming our way, particularly as we discuss some of the political headwinds. I think that you can look kind of at the world and think about supply chain issues. You can think about fuel costs and what that may do to impact some of these large projects that we're trying very hard and diligently to keep on budget and on time. And I think we're heavily impacted by things in the world, things happening in DC, and how we can adjust and be nimble, which isn't always easy for a massive organization. So trying to figure out how we can adjust in real time to an ever-changing landscape.
Understood. Thank you for that. And thank you for the question in the audience. Marty, this one's for you. You mentioned how Hayden AI is on MTA buses, but how does AI on the buses work to reduce collisions or improve performance?
That's a great question. Yeah. So what it does is it in real time identifies a car that's blocking a bus stop or maybe double parked or parked in a bus lane, which happens all the time. And so what happens is the bus is able to identify that vehicle. And then the next bus is also able to verify, yep, that vehicle's still there and blocking transit for citizens, right? And so what then happens is there's a package that's pulled together and sent to be processed, and a violation will be verified and sent out. These are highly, highly accurate. So only situations where there's a blockage is there an actual violation that's processed. And the whole point, like I said earlier, is that we want to get that person to go, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. I should pay attention to that. I shouldn't be blocking a lane so 30 people can't, get to where they need to get or more. And it works. So we see very low double violations. So that's what's happening is you're basically you're enforcing the trying to keep the bus lane clear, trying to keep the bus stop clear. We also protect bike lanes all over the United States. So we're huge biking advocates. And that would be another example where you're just trying to get cars getting out of the places they shouldn't be because somebody wants to park and go get a latte or something. So that's hopefully that answers the question, but it's identifying the violator, enforcing that, and then changing behavior through that process.
Thank you. Thank you. Lihia, this one is for you. New York City DOT is currently soliciting comment on siting of bike battery swap stations for deliveristas. I noticed, or this person noted, oh, question just disappeared. There we go. Noticed that City DOT apparently is only considering Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn. Any discussion regarding siting some closer to where delivery people live to reduce residential battery-related fires?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so we know that DOT, and we started conversations with DOT most recently, actually, and Tiffany was part of that as well, about I think how we ensure that deliveristas are part of these. When I said, solutions and are part of the conversation about rethinking where those e-battery charging solutions should be placed across the city of New York. And yes, there is absolutely two realities. I think that DOT's planning is to make sure that there is input from communities to understand where e-bike charging solutions are needed at the most. And for deliveristas, e-battery solutions, I agree, are needed in two areas, right? Where they're mostly making deliveries, which happens to be where they are actively working, which the majority happens to be in Manhattan, or areas where they live and work. And so part of the conversation with us with DOT is about making sure that some of these e-battery solution stations actually occurred where deliveristas, or at least deliveristas, there is a high density of delivery work, or where delivery workers need the most. And I think part of the bigger conversation is also about how to expand access to funding to ensure that we can bring more charging battery solutions, not only in areas where there's a high density for need, but also out of boroughs. And I know the Bronx is one of them that needs the most, where there has been a great number of occurrences of e-bike fires, and also in Queens, right, where there is a number of e-bike fires that have happened in the next year. But as I have said, again, part of our work is to make sure that we, under this new administration, I strongly believe that there is a great excitement and interest in thinking how we can expand e-battery charging solutions to communities that needs the most. And the fact that we had our first meeting with the commissioner, and that we have people that really understand the need to be creative about expanding e-battery solutions, and are also interested in bringing and putting people at the center of these conversations. I think it's critical. And I think we are in a very unique political moment where we can finally do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try this one. This one is for everyone. And it's about infrastructure delivery. So we talked a little bit about innovation and advancements, right? Everything from Zalihia's earlier point about building out physical infrastructure. We talked a little bit about procurement, improvement, et cetera, et cetera. So here's a question. Infrastructure is so important, especially in this region. Yet, to build it takes so long and costs so much. Can the panel discuss how they view infrastructure delivery for transportation and maybe how the US can improve it to be more, say, like China or maybe some other advanced country? Any thoughts on that one?
I can start off by sharing that there's a reason why these transportation mega projects take a long time. And there's a reason why agencies are also a little bit slower to move. There's, our public agencies, they are tasked to protect the public and move millions of people every single day. And so reliability and that steadiness is a feature, not a bug. And so the systems that underlie our public agencies are also by design slower to respond. And so I think there are ways, though, that we can think creatively around creating safe spaces and understanding there's a lot of internal processes, a lot of legal procurement, insurance. There's a lot of these administrative processes that don't often get a lot of the view in the public, but they are underlying and critical. And there's a lot of ways that if we can maybe refine and right size and have a more adaptive and iterative approach to trying new things, that can help. And also to maybe modifying some of the internal processes to reduce some of that red tape and understanding the intent behind this versus the goal. I'll give an example. I'm going to shout out to the Port Authority because I think that their procurement team is really innovative. They have done incredible work where they have used the transit tech lab process. We have an open challenge-based process. And they have essentially understood all of the formal rules around competitive procurements, and they've realized that our open challenge-based process is a competitive procurement and allows them to quickly scale technologies that are proven through our iterative testing process. And not have to go back out to a competitive RFP. So we're actively understanding new ways where, can this model be adapted by other agencies, by the city agencies? And so we're soliciting those discussions. But that's an example of how one agency is really leading on that front. And, there's definitely room for exploration with all of our agency partners as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Leah, did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it was interesting. I mean, just want to give a quick example. We had the Deliverista Hub um, for 4 years as an idea, even though we had secure funding. We had a previous administration that was very committed to this Deliverista Hub. It took us 4 years to get through a lot of the red tapes, right? And and when we had the new administration come in, and we imagined that it was going to take another year or 2 years, I have to say, having a government that understands the need for infrastructure and the urgency to reduce the red tapes to advance technology is so important and so critical. We had a Deliverista hub built in less than a month and significantly remove all these red tapes that have been in hold for the last 4 years. It made it happen. It just showed me what government can do if they really, really care and they're really committed to making sure agencies on like have the tools and the resources to move around to make things happen. And I have to say one of the big hurdles was about all these requirements that many of these new laws and enforcement have been to put in place. And many of these requirements don't really exist yet because many of these technologies are being tested for the first time. But part of testing is about taking chances and taking the opportunities to be able to move faster. So I think there is a unique opportunity in New York City, but I think a lot of them is centered about education, collaboration, and building true partnerships as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, here's a spicy question, and it's for everybody. What are your views on the future of AV transportation in the region. So what are your views on autonomous vehicles? Thoughts, right? This panel is about innovation, what's moving us to the future. So curious, thoughts on safety, thoughts on energy use, thoughts on privacy. What are your thoughts?
I'll
So I've been,
Oh,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
please. Yeah, go
No,
ahead,
you go.
Angela.
Yeah, mine is not going to be super helpful. Sorry. I've been at Amazon for about a year, and Amazon does have the Zoox, and before that, I was at Google, which has a division called Waymo. I think New York is rightfully very same as Stacy was talking about, right? Like there is a lot of conversation because these spaces are very complex. I think the streets are a shared resource and it's a very crowded resource. And I think the conversations reflecting the complexity of the streets is sort of part of the process of introducing these technologies into New York. And so I expect I do see that they're testing and piloting a lot of these technologies in other places before coming to New York, and I think that is a rational approach.
Yeah, go for it, Marty.
Just a comment. Yeah, well, we're headquartered in San Francisco, which is just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Waymos every day, more dominant than Uber. So it's happening, right? And I think we're learning a lot in a place like the city here. Um, and how do we leverage, vehicles like that to improve some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier? I'll give one example. So we have one agency that wants to do more safer parking enforcement. And some folks that are doing that, it's not exactly the safest job or the most popular job in the world. And as you can get vehicles a little bit more autonomous, it becomes kind of a pretty efficient, safe way to do some of that stuff. So I agree with the earlier comment. It's kind of coming, and I think some other cities are giving us an opportunity to really learn about some of the challenges and opportunities.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the last question for today, and this is for everyone. So the audience is filled with a mixture of students, mid-career professionals, executive leaders, and retirees. What message should everyone leave this conversation with?
I can start. So I think oftentimes in government, there's this, fear of experimentation, fear of trying new things. And so I would say you don't have to know all the answers before starting. You can test things. The best approach would be to start small, have a specific problem, cast a wide net for solutions, and then running iterative tests and understanding what works and capturing quantitative data to really building the business value of what can work and scale. So that's how you can build the business case to scale.
Other parting words from our panelists?
Yeah, I mean, I heard today, I think we started the conversation with innovation, right? Like, what is innovation and how we define innovation? And something to always think about is that innovation is not just technology, but it's also about the human beings who are powering or depending or using this technology. And I want us to think about that. And I think you asked the last question about, you know, we have multi-billion dollar corporations investing millions of dollars in new technology to make our lives more easier, more convenient, right? And and often the theme lost in those conversations are the human beings who are either going to benefit or are going to be impacted. And I always want to think about that innovation is both is technology and human, and how we are making sure that innovation is not coming at a human cost, where it's impacting the workers' lives or the people who are powering or our cities' economies. And I want to think this because we're seeing innovation happen in many forms in different ways, and often the human beings who um, are so essential to our cities are sort of forgotten or left out of these conversations.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and
Yeah.
I'll also just say, I think a lot of people think about infrastructure and transportation and goods movement as change coming slowly, but I do think that there's been a lot of introduction of innovation and change in New York City in the past couple of years. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there has been a clear policy goal from the city and state about, moving towards more sustainable modes of transportation, and where the public sector, private sector, and New Yorkers align on that goal, the change can be really swift and really transformative. And so I am excited about the future of particularly the micromobility segment, but in the policy and the public-private partnership space.
Thank you all so much. Those are really positive words. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to turn it over to my dear friend and former colleague, Rachel. Thank you all.
Wow, what a lot to think about. Thank you all. Thanks to Justine for setting the stage, Tiffany for moderating such an engaging discussion, and of course the panelists for your candor and your insights. Thank you, Ligia, Angela, Stacy, Jean, Marty, and of course to the audience for your attention and great questions. Please tune in for tomorrow's discussion, Creating Opportunity for All, Building the Housing We Need, and I hope to see many of you on Friday at our in-person program.